You are listening to a One Pint Stand, a Minnesota craft beer podcast that tells the stories of craft beer in Minnesota and beyond. So kick back, relax, and grab a cold one. The show starts now. Hello, my name is Dan Bobian, and I write, produce, and host a One Pint Stand. I'm ecstatic that you are listening. This episode of a One Pint Stand is proudly sponsored by First Draft Tap Solutions, a local Minnesota line cleaning business with a personal touch. On this episode, I interview Eric Sannerud, a man who is passionate about hops and knows a mind-boggling amount about them. I've wanted to sit down and pick Eric's brain for a long time, and I'm really happy that the stars were in alignment and we sat down at Dual Citizen Brewing to have a really wonderful and substantive beer conversation. So let's head out to the Dual Citizen Brewing Company tap room for my chat with Eric Sannerud about hops. Cheers. Welcome to another on-location episode of A One Pint Stand. We're here at Dual Citizen Brewing Company, and I am being joined with the Lord of the Hops, Eric Sannerud. I don't know if that's your official nickname, but that is what I'm calling you because you have a wealth of hop knowledge, and I've been really excited for this interview. And I printed out a lot of questions. As a matter of fact, I showed my wife. I'm like, "Do you think this is too many?" She's like, "Jesus, that's 3 pages of questions." And I said, "Well, I got a lot of things that I want to learn about hops, and hopefully the listeners will enjoy it." So thank you so much for taking time to join me here today.
Thank you for having me, Dan. I'm excited about this.
Yeah. So for those of you listeners who don't know, Eric, do you want to kind of introduce yourself and tell me what you do and maybe talk about your journey into craft beer?
Yeah, my name is Eric Sannerud. I am the president of Sannerud Hop Consulting, but I've been in the hop space commercially for over a decade now. First got my start in hops, growing them here in Minnesota with a farm called Mighty X Hops. I'll touch on that. But my first craft beer in my buddy's basement late in high school, it was Surly Furious or Two Hearted.
Okay.
Those were the choices. I don't remember which one I picked. Outside of that, though, you know, the beer that I remember most from the early days, this was after I was legal drinking age, was Chasin' Freshies, a Deschutes fresh hop beer featuring Amarillo.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
It was the first hop I remember reading on the side of a can. It was the first taste of Amarillo. And that's like one of the, certainly not the first beers I've ever had, but one of the early beer experiences of like craft beer. Like I'd never heard of Deschutes, and you know, it wasn't Sterling, it wasn't Summit, it wasn't, you know, the big names, which Deschutes is a huge brewery, but it was in a bomber.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I remember the bomber days.
So that one was cool. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, where did you grow up?
I grew up in Edina, Minnesota.
Okay.
And then now I farm with my family in Malacca, Minnesota.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. Cool. So you have your first taste of craft beer. Initially, what kind of resonated with you about craft beer that kind of drew you into it? I mean, you've been involved with it for quite some time. What was the initial kind of like, what flipped the switch or was the catalyst for your interest?
It's got to be flavor. Flavor. I've always been very fascinated by flavor and aroma. I got into cooking very heavily at the start of college, and you know, it kind of goes along with that flavor and beer. And you know, maybe I'm coming back around full circle to one of my things I like to say is that Coors Light is 20 IBUs away from being a great lager. But no, it is all about flavor, and that's also what led me into the hop side of it. Is that hops are so wild and incredible as a plant. All the different flavors that they can create, the essentially unknowable chemistry as to why using a specific hop in a specific way, at a specific volume, in a specific format, grown in a specific spot, at a specific way and time in the brewing process, which is, in and of itself a whole massive different, not fully understood chemistry. You can't, no one can tell you that if you use this hop at this rate, in this way, at that place, that you'll get exactly the same outcome every time.
Right.
It's an agricultural product. There's wonder and there's mystery and there's art. And there's art in it. And so as much as craft beer is stainless, that's clean and process-oriented and SOPs and all this stuff, there is still this magic in the uncertainty.
Mm-hmm.
And brewers experience that in the brew house, and farmers and hop people, we all experience that in the growing season and in the harvest time.
Right. For instance, I feel like, this is the first year of the Minnesota monsoon season. We've gotten so much rain. That's going to affect all the hops and how they act. And I think that people don't really think about that, but there are so many little variables along the way. So I think that's why a lot of the brewers are a little crazy, because it's the main thing that they work with is so I don't know, finicky and unpredictable. So you said you grew up in Edina. I teach in Hopkins. I'm familiar with that area. I on my commute on 394, I never look out the side as some yahoo is cutting me off in a minivan and look at rolling hills of pasture. How did you get into agriculture?
Yeah, you're not the only one to wonder. My grandparents' farm, I still have it, is in Ham Lake. That's where my dad grew up. And I got into sustainability and the green movement and that stuff in high school, climate change, concerned about that. It was a different era back then, I think we had more hope in some ways. But that led me into this desire to do things more locally. And so I started farming, and I reconnected to that family land and that history there. It was always just Grandma and Grandpa's, and then it became Grandma and Grandpa's farm, and then in my mind, and then I was able to farm there. They allowed me to farm there, so I had land access without needing to do all the risks and all the hurdles that people face. So incredibly privileged to be able to farm in that soil. And from there, that pursuit of flavor and then the pursuit of a crop that really spoke to me led me to hops. I grown out some other things for a year or two before starting in on hops, and hops just they caught my attention and my passion, and I don't grow them anymore, but they were the first crop that I grew for a living.
Yeah.
I was able to pay the bills with, which is a big step, and they still consume the vast majority of my creative space and passion.
Yeah, I think it's that's probably, of the four ingredients that are in beer, hops, malt, water, and yeast, that's the one that probably gets the most spotlight when you talk to people that
as
are...
a hop person, I'm here to tell you that you're correct.
Yeah.
Hops are the best ingredient.
That's right. And so that's, what people love about craft beer, I think, is the just explosion of flavor and aroma. So for people listening who don't know a ton about hops, what's a simple way to think about this complex thing, and explain how do hops affect beer?
In every possible, not every possible way, but in a multitude of ways. Very, very broadly speaking, and this is what people probably know the most. In fact, they've been oversold on, and as a general public, is that hops lend bitterness to beer. That is true, and it's very important because, my goodness, even the sweetest macro lagers still need some hops to not make them so sweet people won't drink them.
Right.
Although the palates of consumers are shifting sweeter and sweeter over time. Hops also contribute the vast majority of the aroma and flavor in specific beer styles. And between flavor, aroma, and bitterness, that kind of gets a lot of to what hops are doing in your various beers. Now, of course, that's at different levels in different beers, depending on the style and the recipe and the brewer's desire. But ultimately, hops make your beer not too sweet, make them more refreshing, and make your beer, for most styles, taste or smell specific ways.
So one thing I was thinking about, and you said this earlier, that there's like an unknowable or unquantifiable magic about hops. And I remember kind of back early in my initial entry into the craft beer world, you mentioned Bombers. I think it was Lagunitas that had a beer called Hop Stupid. Do you remember that? And I think it was advertised as like 140 IBUs, and people were like, "There's no way in hell you can." Who knows that number? So it's like, it's kind of, yeah. And that was like back in those days. It was like, all right, let's see if we can explode your tongue with these super like astringent, bitter, crazy things, and that was like, to me, way out of whack with what my palate could handle. But something that you said, to give balance to a beer, to not make it too sweet. Is that kind of like the best way to think about it, as a way to really dial in the flavor while still giving beer nuance?
Yeah, I mean, hops are not strictly necessary to make beer, but you do need something to make it bitter. Because, if you've ever had the opportunity to drink hot wort or taste, spent grain after the mash, it's very, very sweet.
Yeah.
And that's all food for yeast. We just don't want to drink all of that sweetness.
Right.
You mentioned, 2006. Back then, the IBU wars, they were fondly known as.
Yeah.
The bitterer and bitterer and bitterer beers. And IBU is a separate little interesting, very cool story about, it's calculated. That's a number. That's math. They did math and it said 140. But perceived IBU is an entirely different game.
Yeah.
But even there, though.
What do you mean by that? What do you mean by that?
Perceived, you can have a beer that's calculated 80 IBUs, but is so chock full of hops, alcohol, sweeter malts, fruit, that it doesn't taste, or you're not perceiving it as super bitter. It's covered by all sorts of other stuff.
Yeah.
Whereas if you had a bone dry lager that was 40 IBUs, you might experience it as the most bitter thing you've ever had.
Yeah.
And that's only 40 IBUs. So a lot of things go into how the beer's bitterness is perceived. But within that war, those IBU wars, now we're not in IBU wars anymore. That's probably fairly clear. We've made a very big veer away from IBU wars. We're getting a little bit, bitterness is sneaking back into craft beer, but we got away from it there for 3, 4, 5 years, where it was like IPAs that were like, not even if they weren't milk-shaked with lactose, they still were milkshake as far as like sweetness and mouthfeel.
I call that the Tropicana era of beer.
Boy, that's it's just a lot of calories. Yeah, it's a lot of calories and a lot of booze and not a lot of refreshing. But we've evolved into, now we're in the aroma wars. From the IBU wars to the aroma wars, and I mean, the whole industry's moving, so we might be out of the aroma wars soon too. But just, it used to be all about how much bitterness can you cram in,
right?
And for hop heads now and craft beer nerds now, at least, it is how much hoppiness can you cram in, which is even more opaque and esoteric of an idea than IBUs. I mean, there's no calculation to tell you, what's the hop aroma level in this beer. People just talk about double dry hop, which, what does that mean exactly? Or how many pounds per barrel they use, which is like a rough, decent little math. But that's how it's evolved over, since 2006. When I started drinking 2011, it was still the bitter days, and, Furious was really, really bitter on purpose.
Oh, yeah.
And the evolution of that brand and that story would be so cool if someday someone who actually knew all of it would write a book about how the recipe changes behind that beer have reflected, and how it reflects and shifts with the market.
Yeah.
Because I think more so than any, this may be the most defining Minnesota craft beer brand.
Sure.
And more so than EPA. I don't think EPA is driving left and right, bouncing between the poles as the public perception shifts. I think EPA is a brand that's straight and narrow.
Yeah.
But it'd be interesting to hear that story from someone who knows all the details.
Yeah, that's interesting. Is it fair to say that the biggest misconception about hops is that they're bitter?
Yeah, but it's also, is that even fair? Like, they are bitter.
Yeah.
They're just not only bitter.
One time, and before I was writing about beer, I was at the Autumn Brew Review, and Northern Brewer had a booth, and they were giving away, if you were willing to eat a hop cone, you could get a free shirt and a pint glass. And thank goodness this was like hour 3.5 out of 4. And I'm like, oh, I can do that. And I did it. And I'm like, I can't taste anything after that. But I still have the shirt
did get a free
somewhere,
shirt and
and
a
I
free
still
pint
have the
glass.
pint glass. But that was like, yeah, in that form, there was no other way to like describe what I was tasting. It was just pure unbridled hop bitterness.
Yeah, you what you experienced there was the alpha acids, which are a series of chemicals that when exposed to heat, primarily, will isomerize into isoalpha acids, which are very bitter.
Yeah.
So when you first put it in your mouth, it smelled, tasted amazing.
Yeah.
And then very quickly, because of the heat of your mouth and the chemistry of your mouth, it turned into one of the most bitter, astringent things that coated your mouth and the back of your tongue
Yep.
for at least the rest of the day.
Yeah, and it was like this invisible kind of a tar that I couldn't get off. But you know
I guess if I were to advise anyone who does that, you shouldn't eat hops. They're not technically for that. Gargle with vodka or some sort of alcohol solvent.
oh, okay.
Because it's oil. It's fats.
If only I would have had my trusty vodka flask with me that day. That's probably a good thing. So I think that and this might be true for a lot of people, but like I think when you first get into anything, you're kind of coming at it with baby steps, and your palate is not necessarily developed yet. But when I first started drinking craft beers, it didn't take a lot to really kind of like overpower my palate. And as I've kind of like become more interested in beer and kind of push the boundaries of what my own palate can have, I think my ability to appreciate hops in a beer has grown quite a bit. But I remember the first time I had a Bell's Hop Slam, I thought somebody was trying to kill me. Now that beer tastes really sweet. So what's a good way to kind of help somebody kind of ease into hoppy beers? If they're just getting into craft beer now and they're like, I don't know if I'm ready for bitterness. I know that like a lot of people will say like a cream ale is a good gateway beer for somebody making the transition from like macro to craft and trying to like get their foot in the door of what they like. What's a good gateway hoppy beer or hoppy beer style to kind of get people comfortable with hops?
Oh, that's a really good question. I mean, a pale ale. And one that style is, super broad. You can find all sorts of different pale ales out there. But I would say pale ales, and maybe specifically there's some more modern hazy pale ales out there that are everything that like a bigger hazy IPA might be, but less.
Yeah.
So more approachable. A Daisy Cutter 15-year anniversary. I've been drinking a lot of that at home. That was one of my first like craft beers when I got into craft beer. I was like, oh, that's a cool brand. And you couldn't get it up here yet,
Yeah.
But Daisy Cutter's 15-year anniversary was this month, and so they came out with a 15th anniversary version.
Oh.
That was a tropical pale ale, so the title is, but it's 5.2% Rawaka and Nectaron, I think, or Rawaka and Nelson. No, it's got to be Rawaka and Nectaron. It's not so heavy as Nelson, but two New Zealand hop varieties that are very new world flavor. And that beer is wildly drinkable, full hop flavor and aroma, and very, to my palate, which my palate's super busted now, not bitter. But something like that, a more modern hazy pale ale, or even just Sierra Nevada pale ale, the best beer on the shelf, at every liquor store is Sierra Nevada pale ale. And, that's a wonderful introduction to, what hops can be. And one of the things that I think can be a struggle for entering and getting into hoppy beers is it's not about those styles in general, certainly the styles of hoppy beers that sell, that get notoriety.
Well, I like the way you say it. I'm gonna
Notoriety. Those beers that get the attention in this style are wild. They are super hoppy. They are over hopped. They are intentionally, recklessly hop. Oops, we dumped all the marshmallows in, like Captain Crunch or whatever. Oh, that's Lucky Charms. But, it's like that. And so it can be hard to find like an approachable, nuanced, like restrained expression So Sierra Nevada Pale Ale, some things that sometimes when you find things labeled hazy pale ale, those are little signals to me that I'm saying, oh, this isn't supposed to be the like quad, triple dry hopped, 11%,
Right.
all the way to the max on hop aroma, hop flavor, alcohol beers that kind of get the Instagram posts and attention of the whales and stuff. So it can be hard to find, but in my opinion, those nuanced, restrained hop expressions really show master brewers at work. It is not easy to make 8 pounds of hops per dry hop in your barrel, 8 pounds per barrel dry hop taste good necessarily, but it's very hard. It's harder to make 1.5 pounds per barrel across your brew house taste like alluring.
Yeah.
Not just taste ho-hum.
Yeah.
And so those kind of styles and those expressions at those lower hopping rates are hard to find, but things that even, dedicated hop nerds like myself maybe even see more value in.
Yeah.
So I'm for those of you interested in hops, Sierra Nevada Pale Ale, okay, I'll give you 3 that you can find everywhere. Sierra Nevada Pale Ale, Deschutes Fresh Squeezed, and Bell's Two Hearted.
Yeah.
Now, Bell's Two Hearted is going to get a little hoppier, but just those are 3 cornerstone expressions of cornerstone public hops, flavor profiles that built American craft beer, and specifically the hoppy area of American craft beer. And those 3 beers, taste one of each and get back to me. Let me know which ones you liked and what you thought, and that'll give me a lot of, that'll tell you a lot about what sort of direction you might want to go in your hoppy beer explorations.
Now, you just use a word that I'm not familiar with. You said public hops. What does that mean?
So there are different ownership models.
Eric has just pulled out an Encyclopedia Britannica that he is handwritten. So here we go. Buckle up, folks.
There are different ownership models behind every hop variety. Public hops are what might be implied by that. They are owned by nobody in particular. In America, there's a public hop breeding program that, you, Dan, and my tax dollars go to support. For anyone on the listening to this who gets grumpy about taxes, don't worry about it. It's a very, 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 very small percentage. And in that program, they started that program so that after Prohibition, America could be competitive in hop production again. Because we had lost all of our hop production. We were, losing that hop, import-export battle. And so they said, we're going to invest in domestic varieties. So we're going to have a breeder. Dr. Al Honnold was one of the first breeders. Dr. Al Honnold created a program, and it's been working ever since then to develop American public hop varieties. Either public hops, that means that they were developed using federal dollars and then released from the federal USDA breeding program, and then anyone anywhere in the world can grow those hops. Anyone anywhere in the world can sell those hops. Any brewer anywhere in the world can buy them from anyone who's selling them. They are free hops, another way to think about it, like free market hops, like perfect competition, essentially. And that is public hops. Not only was that what built American hop production to be first or second in the world, depending on the year, flip-flops with Germany traditionally. Primarily Washington State, but also Oregon and Idaho. Started mostly in Oregon. But that public hop breeding program put America on the map for hop production, but then also, because of the coolness of hops and of breeding programs, which we may not get into all of that, but there's a fingerprint in every breeding program. And people will say it's the fingerprint of the breeder. But there is almost an infinite world of genetics that hops can pull from. There's parentage, there's males and there's females, and there's wild hops, and there's all these hops in the world you could cross and see what happens with their progeny.
Yeah.
But also, breeders have preferences. They have different traits they promote and different traits they don't approve of, they don't like as much. I mean, people drink beer have different preferences. Brewers have different preferences. So there's always this human influence on what the hop does. But this public hop breeding program created Cascade, created Chinook, created Centennial. These cornerstone
I was going to say, those
flavors.
are like the pillars of craft beer, essentially.
The flavors that defined what made American craft beer different from not American craft beer. And then now, by extension, that sort of hop flavor and hop expression of fruit, just a fruit versus, a lot of German hops expressions are flowery or spicy or certainly more restrained. That expressive American hop profile that's led by fruit maybe some sweetness or pine or grapefruit, or nowadays, it is more sweet candy and vanilla stuff. But like that start is what defined American craft beer and still does. You can't escape that.
Yeah.
And it's also now defining IPA as a style, as American style IPAs are what become exported to the rest of the world. You go to every country in Europe, there are craft brewers, and in those craft breweries, they're selling you IPAs, but American style. That is the American style that's being exported.
Yeah.
Heineken bought most of Lagunitas initially so that they could sell Lagunitas IPA in Europe and in Africa.
Okay.
Like, this is the reverse of golden lager, pale lager, coming out of Pilsen and coming out of Germany and taking over the world. I'm not saying IPA is going to take down pale lager as the style of beer everyone drinks all the time, but it's growing internationally in a way that, no other truly American beer style ever has.
Mm-hmm. So what would you've done a nice job kind of defining what American hops are, kind of what the flavor profile. I guess I have two questions. So before I ask this question, Washington State, Oregon, and Idaho. What about those areas? Is it the climate, amount of rain, humidity levels out there that make it ideal for growing hops? Because nobody mentions Toledo, Ohio as being a hotbed for hop production. So what is it about the Pacific Northwest that is so iconic when it comes to American hop farming?
Well, first of all, it's the dry side of Idaho. The dry side of Washington and Oregon, and a desert in Idaho.
Okay.
So this is not the rainy, humid side. That would not be good for hops. We're on the dry side, the eastern side of those two states, in the desert. Especially the Yakima Valley is a desert. But those states, because they're great locations for growing hops, from an environmental standpoint, they are warm, they're dry, they have a long season, they're not humid, they don't get too much rain, they have irrigation from snowmelt from the mountains. The timing was also, those areas were colonized, settled. The native peoples were eradicated more recently, and so there was still free land more easily to be handed out. The land in Minnesota had already been mostly handed out by then.
Okay.
That's a difficult part of our history that farmers especially have a tough time with.
Mm-hmm.
But there's the primary reason is that that's the best place. If you're going to grow hops anywhere in America, you would grow them in those spots.
Okay.
But then there's also social and economic reasons that when hops were a crop that the federal government wanted to grow more of, there was a lot of land that was good for growing them that happened to have become available.
Okay. All right. So my next question is, if Centennial, Chinook, Cascade are the kind of American type of hops, how would you describe Germanic hops? And what is the main difference?
And these rules are being blurred now. All of hops all around the world are moving towards more similar expressions based on what is in demand at a given time. But traditionally, American public hops specifically were like American citrus, so like grapefruit, orange rind, lemon, and then pine.
Yeah.
And traditionally, German hops were herbal or spicy or floral, and in a more maybe fruity, but in a restrained version, like dried orange rind, not fresh orange zest.
Sure.
And then to wrap, the other very large important growing regions now are New Zealand and Australia.
Okay.
And those two growing locations are known for, that's where New World comes from. Those are hops that are very aromatically punchy, tropical fruits, very high in thiols and free thiols and
now
sulfur compounds.
What is thiols? What does that mean?
Thiols are a classification of aroma compound that is very, very powerful. That our noses detect at very small levels. And so, and in addition to that, are from like a quality of aroma, they are very punchy and very heady and heavy.
Okay.
They are similar to, like, cannabis has a lot of that. These sulfur and thiol compounds are very punchy.
Okay.
So those are maybe more New World hops. But But yeah. So that American public hop breeding program is the bedrock of defining American craft beer flavors. And you might think, Eric, there's public hops, so does that imply there's also, in my mind, the opposite, or private hops? And
Yeah.
there are public and there are private hops. There's a lot more nuance to the private side. There's a lot of different types of folks who could own hops. You could own a hop variety, but there are small independent growers who own their own varieties.
Okay.
Most notable among those are El Dorado and Amarillo. Those are grower-owned private varieties.
Okay. All right. I didn't know that.
Probably the two most successful, well-known ones. And then there's also merchant-owned private varieties, or varieties that are owned by entities that are primarily merchants in the space. And
Okay.
those varieties are Citra, Simcoe, Mosaic. Those are owned by one merchant group.
Okay.
And so these different ownership groups have different levels of influence and impact, and really increasingly shape the reality of the hop market that both farmers and brewers participate in.
Okay. Am I making this up, but was there a time or a point in time when AB InBev bought out all the South African hops, or was that just a old wives' tale?
I also heard that story, and I was not close enough to know if that was true or not. I believe it to be true. That is an interesting example of early in this proprietary hop, or private proprietary. These different words are used. Some folks take offense to the word private because when you say public and private, most people like the public over the private inherently. Which maybe that's just something that we should all reflect on and appreciate that. Maybe we do want there to be more public than there currently is.
Yeah.
Even if we have to call private proprietary so that we don't offend anybody and it doesn't look too bad, maybe it shouldn't be maybe we should like the other stuff more.
Yeah.
But that was an example of early on in this race. Proprietary hops and the rise of proprietary hops made a lot of people, a small number of people, an amount of money and power that will forever have changed our industry. And that purchase is an example of the sort of excitement around these proprietary varieties of if I can corner the market on these South African hops, and now only AB InBev company get to play with this very special flavor, that gives us the leg up on the rest of the competition.
Sure.
Now, I don't think that made any difference to their beer sales. I think ultimately consumers don't care necessarily about what the name of the hop is. They care about what the beer tastes like and what it costs. And I think in some ways, I'm certain that is not that wholesale buying of everything in a certain country is not going to be part of a brewery's plan in the future.
Okay. Yeah. Now, I know that, so we've defined public and private hops. And I think maybe this is underneath those umbrellas of categories for hops, noble hops. I think when I hear of the Sam Adams commercials, where they say we use a unique blend of noble hops. What is a noble hop? What does that mean? Is that also up in can be interpreted, or is it there's
bit.
These ones?
A little bit. So the little bit part is that noble hops and landrace hops are different terms that often are used to describe similar varieties.
Okay.
But in my world, I define landrace hops as the original progenitors before they started breeding hops, the original hops that they cultivated in primarily Germany. So that's Tet, Hallertau, Tradition. I'm not going to be able to name them off the top of my head. And then there's noble hops, which for the American market sort of mean lager-style hops grown in, Germany, but also that applies to Czech-style Czech hops. Or maybe even
Would that be
Polish
Saaz?
Yeah, Saaz is a Czech hop.
Okay.
And the history of noble hops and the relationship with landrace hops is very, very cool and interesting, and not something that I know everything about.
Okay. All right. So we've kind of defined some categories of hops, which is interesting. I did not know the private versus public. That's fascinating. Now, I know that there's a lot of newer and some might say trendier hops that kind of have derived from maybe older varieties, or you use the term parentage. Maybe that's the right way to phrase it. Can you give me some examples of some of those hops that are existing now that maybe came from an older pedigree?
I mean, all hops came from another hop somewhere.
Yeah. Okay.
And so to some extent, all hops, at some point there was an hop, presumably. But there are people who are very interested in lineages of hops and, kind of memorize, who came from what. But primarily in hops, you can just look at it from a timeline perspective. Like, okay, hops that were being grown in the 70s, well, some number of them, whether the males or the females or the unnamed females, like some of that genetic stock is what fed into the hops in the 80s,
Okay.
the 90s, and so forth. You can always go back. You could go back to the 80s if you have germplasm and breed it now.
Or a DeLorean.
That's right. But ultimately, it's a building block structure. The earlier hops are required steps until you get to the later hops.
Okay.
And so, yes is the short answer to that question. And you would need to look at specific hop varieties and their parentage to look at, what did they come from, in fact. And honestly, I think if you're a hop breeder or very into hop genetics, looking at parentage can mean something to you.
Mm-hmm.
But also, in general, hop breeding is also an art more than a science. And some of the craziest things comes from places that you wouldn't suspect. And so if I were someone looking into hop parentage and breeding, I would just be curious about seeing what the family trees look like, less so, oh, that's a daughter of Perla, so it's not good for IPAs. Well, we have no idea.
Yeah.
These genes get all mixed up and all of that happens, but also, the nuance of differences that can make a hop perform in certain ways that we find desirable versus not might be, a shifting of 10% of the oil profile from, farnesene to geraniol, and all of a sudden it's a whole different expression. Those are different terpenes in hops that create common flavors in hops. That could be an entirely different hop expression that takes it from, it's a lager hop or it's a bittering hop.
Okay.
To, this is a star of the show hop.
When you say terpene, what does that mean?
It's like a thiol. It's another aroma.
Okay.
Family of aroma compounds,
Okay.
chemicals that make things smell.
All right.
Yeah.
So what are some popular hops right now? Like that, as you said, kind of for a while there, we were in everybody was going for juicy, hazy, tropical, like that kind of ripe, kind of mango,
I think we're still there,
pineapple. And then, as I try to get out to a lot of different places because I'm fascinated with this lovely beverage that we love to drink. I've seen more and more the last couple of years, more West Coast IPAs popping up amidst the jungle of all the ones that you can't see through. What are some new hops that you see used in brewing currently? What are the darlings that the hop heads are going nuts for?
That's an interesting question. Honestly, to some extent, it hasn't changed, and the different IPAs are the same hops packaged in a different way, which doesn't mean that they're not tasty in different ways. But almost to find an IPA that doesn't have Citra and or Mosaic in it is a chore.
Yeah.
And those are very incredible hops. They have a lot of different flavors and expressions, and they certainly they define the modern era of American IPA flavors. But they're so overplayed, it's unbelievably boring.
Yeah.
A lot of times you'll see, obviously I watch this too whenever I see a brewery post about a new beer. I'm like, oh, okay, well, they say what hops are in it. And it's like, last week we had a hazy IPA with Citra Mosaic, and this week we have a West Coast IPA with Citra Mosaic. And you're like, okay, well, first of all, I know you're long, which means they have a lot of those on their contract or in their cooler that they got to work through. So that's one. There's a practical aspect there that, that's not really their fault that they got maybe shoehorned into signing these contracts. A lot of hops were sold on contract, or at least were in the past. Brewers would get into difficult positions, so they got to eat through inventory. I get that. But also, there is only so much expression that those hops can give you.
Right.
Especially, there's a bell curve. So, 80% of them are basically the same expression. Some of them are really bad, and then every once in a while there's an incredible expression from those hops. And it's like, what's the shot? That, your Citra Mosaic Hazy IPA is going to be the one.
Yeah.
And what are the effing chances that yours is going to be the most amazing one? Honestly, it's a lot less than 20%. So I'm constantly frustrated by the fact that we have rapidly gone into a more monochromatic hop varietal expression landscape. The rise of hazy IPA made hops center stage to a whole other generation of consumers and a whole another generation of businesses. I mean, so many craft breweries are built around hazy IPA.
Right.
Lupulin existed and then exploded because they were there with hazy IPA early
Yeah.
in this market, and they deserve that. Hui is still incredible, but also it's kind of become it's like golden handcuffs in the sense that both brewers, the market supplied too much and brewers purchased too much Citra and Mosaic, and they're poster children of like Citra Mosaic, Simcoe, a little bit of Galaxy in there, like these overutilized hops. Well, then also consumers and like people who want to drink hops and beer, like don't know all this stuff, but also are handcuffed unknowingly. Just like,
Right.
oh, I love hazy IPA. Maybe you don't know that 90% of the hazy IPAs you have, 80% of the hops in those are all the same.
Well, I mean, that's
But maybe you can tell when you drink them. They're like, oh, this tastes like a hazy IPA.
No, I don't think people can. That's the problem. And I think that's like this is a problem with craft beer in general. It's like people got into craft beer because they went to either there was a local bar that all of a sudden started carrying an amber ale, a brown ale, a pale ale, an oatmeal stout, and it was not the thing. There were all sorts of different choices, and that was fascinating and that was interesting. It kind of, it's like, is the tail wagging the dog here in the sense that the Haze Boys are dictating what craft beer is becoming, and that's a problem because I think you need to learn about something. You mentioned cooking. Okay, so this is maybe like, if you really get into cooking and you study cooking and you understand that, like, okay, going back to certain like places where things were invented, like the classic French sauces, like they don't change. They're necessary elements for modern cuisine that everybody is going nuts for, the James Beard, but it's very simple. And it's not sexy at all. It's tedious to a certain degree. Brewing a variety of craft beer styles that maybe aren't super duper popular. They're not the 20 pounds per barrel dry hopped magical unicorn tier triple IPA. But they need to exist because it's the foundation of what everything was built on. And I just worry that when a brewery, and there's a lot of them, but like you said, it's the same beer, just kind of rotated. Either like maybe they change one little thing, but I feel like that's a cop-out. I feel like that is kind of a cheap shortcut, but there's a whole generation of drinkers coming in that think that craft beer is these like hop slurry, sweet, almost fruit juice bomb beers, and everything else is just gross or there's no appreciation for it. That scares me. What do you think?
I mean, I'm not going to yuck anybody's yum. Like, I don't like fruit beers or beers with sugar added to them, but that doesn't mean other people can't. But I do think what I see that it feels like it's a deeper challenge. It's not just like this isn't what I'm used to when I started. It's some of the values that I appreciated about craft beer and what pulled me into it was valuing diversity. In the earlier days, that might have been more about style, although now it is also inclusive of how people appear and who people are and what communities craft beer belongs in or is marketed to. But then also, certainly at the beginning, innovation and creativity. I mean, that outpaced quality for a long time.
Yeah.
As it was more important to be different than to be good.
Yep.
And then also there had been a very sort of, I always call it like a punk attitude, but like, I'm not going to wear a suit and tie. I'm not going to, do the thing where all I care about is margins. I'm going to care about something in addition to margin. And I am, from a hops point of view, the conversation that like 90% of the IPAs you drink have the same 2 to 5 hops in them, that happen to be owned by 1 to 2 companies. Like, that's not diverse from a point of view of palate flavor. It's not diverse from a point of view of economic models supported and or independent farmers. It's certainly not creative or innovative. At this point, everything that could be done with the Citra has basically been done.
Yeah.
And it's certainly not punk. It's really not punk to be putting your brewery, spending dollars, and in a lot of cases your brewery's brands, aligned with with enormous multinational corporations.
Yeah.
And like suckling at their teat on Instagram every time you can. Every time you get the chance, you post about Eric's Hop Company just so you know that the king knows that you exist. You're like you little court jester. And I do think that stuff just like pulls at the very core of my soul. Partly because there's that punk streak, but partly because, that's rooted in a morality around, not thinking bullying is okay, about not thinking that it's okay for the big person to squish out the little person.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that hurts me the most about craft beer today. And some of the most respected breweries who are creating incredible beer, the values is one thing I'm fond of saying these days is, there's a lot of values that breweries plaster on their social media, that they plaster on their front door, that they may or may not mean.
Yeah.
Separate topic. But on the back door, there ain't no values. The back door is about dollars and cents. The back door is about who have I been buying from. The back door is about which salesperson smoked me up or got me that sweet steak or sent me this super cool backpack. And there's a lot that a brewer and the purchasing person have to know. It's not their fault to kind of hit the easy button and take in these common hops from the biggest suppliers who make it so inconvenient. But it's like when I was in school, we were all pissed that all of our food was off the back of a Sodexo truck. Well, at a lot of breweries, all the hops are off the back of company XYZ's truck.
Yeah.
And that's not healthy for brewers, it's not healthy for farmers, and it's not ultimately, therefore, serving the needs of beer consumers, craft beer consumers. It's not leading to more creativity. It's not leading to more diversity. It's not leading to more competition.
Yeah.
And we could talk about that for many hours, but I don't want to get too deep into, sad things or tough things.
Yeah.
But I do share some of the, I experienced a different world when I got into this space. And in many ways, craft beer has gotten a lot better quality-wise, diversity as far as people-wise, certainly at least lip service to that fact. But on the ingredient side, there remains a reckoning to come on squaring the public perception of craft beer values and the values and structures that craft beer ingredient purchasing tends to support.
Yeah. We're going to take a break because our glasses are empty, but I want to come back to there's an economic thing for that I want to get into when we come back. You are listening to a One Pint Stand. We're here at Dual Citizen with Eric Sannerud talking hops. Hey, thank you so much for listening. Hopefully you're enjoying a One Pint Stand. My aim is to help spread the word about craft beer. Enjoying craft beer is a passion of mine, and I love chatting about it with other people. A One Pint Stand has a goal of helping breweries tell their stories. I love to get out in and beyond Minnesota to visit breweries, beer bars, and meet other interesting beer people. If you are also into those things, you probably want to keep tabs on the show. So go ahead and follow a One Pint Stand on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. We would also appreciate any and all positive reviews on Spotify and iTunes to help make it easier for other craft beer listeners to find us. If you like reading about craft beer, I started my own blog, and all of my writing can be found at aonepintstand.com. After 8 years of writing as editor-in-chief at Beer Pluma, it was time for me to start my own blog. So make sure you check out the blog for some interesting craft beer content of the written variety. I truly appreciate you listening and taking time to enjoy our stories. Now, before we head back to the show, I want to talk about this episode's sponsor, First Draft Tap Solutions. Brett Erickson runs the show and uses his over a decade-long experience as a head brewer to provide a hands-on approach to line cleaning, draft installation, and technical support. If you're looking for a quality experience with someone who will get the job done right, give First Draft Tap Solutions a pour. To get in touch with Brett, email him at firstdrafttapsolutions@gmail.com or give him a call at 612-839-5304. Brett has a manageable number of clients to ensure that he is available to give you an amazing level of service. So check out First Draft Tap Solutions for all your line cleaning and draft installation needs.
How about a beer?
Okay, well, we're back for the second half. We've got full beers, and again, we're at Dual Citizen Brewing Company, and I'm being joined by Eric Sannerud, the master of hops. What did I call you? The Lord of the Hops? Lord of the Dance. Lord of the Hops.
I do like Lord of the Rings.
Lord of the Rings. There we go. So when we left, we were kind of talking about how kind of like the pros and cons of a lot of breweries using the same hops. And I guess I want to kind of put a kind of wrap it up with asking, is there a negative economic fallout for, say, a smaller brewery who wants to use, we'll say for the purposes of our discussion, Simcoe, okay? So everybody's brewing beers with Simcoe. There's a little teeny tiny brewery that wants to brew with Simcoe, but does a hop's popularity drive up the price and limit the access to it? I know you had mentioned earlier in the discussion that a lot of hops are bought by contract. So if you've got Bell's brewing hundreds of thousands of barrels a year, and a lot of that is probably Centennial because it's Bell's Two-Hearted, they probably have no problem getting whatever contract they want. But Brewery B out of Podunk, Minnesota, that maybe brews 400 barrels, do they even have a shot at that?
In general, yeah. I mean, breweries are there's a lot of obviously there's a lot of things at the hop market and the structure of the hop market, how it influences what choices breweries can make, what things breweries have access to. In my mind, one of the big, I think about the economic side from a farm perspective primarily. In my mind, systems start at the start of the value chain, and then they end at the end of the consumer. And if we want them to be equitable, logical, environmental, then they got to make sense each step along the way until we get to the end. In most cases, there's someone in the middle who's kind of taking advantage of both people, and in a lot of the way that modern supply chains have grown to be. But here, I think the main challenge that breweries maybe don't see that they're facing with the advent of a new hop market that's overwhelmingly dominated by a handful of different privately owned private companies with the varieties that they control is that hop prices are proprietary hop prices are generally artificially inflated. One of the benefits that if Eric's Hop Company owns Eric's Hop, I get to decide. I get to decide how much of it is grown. I get to decide how much it's sold for.
Okay.
And by doing that, depending on what my goals are, I might just try to maximize my own personal profit, which would be maximizing supply and trying to maximize cost at the same price at the same time.
Yeah.
So that makes me the most money. And that has challenges, though, because on the one hand, brewers, people I'm selling my Eric's Hop to, are paying more than they need to, which is impacting them and then also their consumers.
Right.
Part of the reason why these big hazy IPAs cost a lot of money is that hops cost a lot of money. Part of the reason why a lot of hops cost a lot of money is that there are profit goals for private owners of these varieties to hit and achieve. that their entire businesses are built around.
Sure.
And the other half of that is by managing supply, it turns the farmer from an independent farm where they get to choose what varieties they grow and how much of them and when they harvest them and how they grow them into, factory of sorts where you're basically an employee of the company that owns the variety because they pay you to grow it and they tell you how to harvest it and they tell you when to harvest it and they tell you how to treat it. And then in the era we're entering now where they grew way too many of, Eric's Hop Company grew way too many of Eric's hops and is flooding the market. Eric's like, oh, I got to protect the value of Eric's hop in the minds of the brewers. So I'm cutting growers off left and right to make sure I don't have the oversupply doesn't become too much of an oversupply.
Yeah.
And so now we're last year and then especially now this year, farmers are feeling the downsides of the private hop contracts and that ride that the market's been on. And independent, smaller farmers who are not memberships of these large, not members or owners of these very large hop breeding and marketing companies are really feeling the pain, which is where my, my personal value set comes in and says, this isn't right. And I think about what can I do in my role in this industry as someone who knows a lot about hops, who interacts with a lot of farmers and a lot of brewers. What can I do to educate and inspire brewers, drinkers, to engage more with the story, engage more with the values of the purchasing of their products coming in that back door of the brewery.
Mm-hmm. Is that, what are some of the other economic things that would impact the cost of hops? Obviously, over the last several years, the cost of everything has shot up quite noticeably.
Yeah, there's some big things. I mean, a big one, again, this is tied to equity, is pay, farm labor pay.
Yeah.
The state of Washington instituted new minimums and reduction of now farm workers are now liable for overtime, which is not the case in a lot of states, including Minnesota.
Wow. Okay.
That's a complex subject, but that is something that's driving cost of production for hops. And to be clear, there's cost of production things like propane costed more for a while, and inputs cost more, and now labor's costing more, and it costs more to import-export stuff or whatever. But there's also artificial inflation of cost of goods around, specifically proprietary varieties. Different proprietary owners extract different amounts of, fees, licensing fees for growing them, and then more or less a tax on each harvested pound, and, have different goals around setting a market price and trying to maintain that market price. So, not all private hops or proprietary hops are treated the same. Not all private or proprietary hops have the same sort of potential for exploitative effects on breweries or growers. So it's, we got to be specific, or we got to be, careful without being too broad about some of this. But ultimately, from a brewer standpoint, from a concerned drinker standpoint, you cannot go wrong with public hops.
Yeah.
Public hops, they are so pure. They cannot really be tainted by the dark hand of slow creeping profit motive.
Yeah.
In the fact that you can't own them. Everyone has a fair shake to grow them, whether you're a grower in the big 3 states or whether you're a grower in Minnesota or Wisconsin or Iowa. You could go grow a bunch of Cascade in your backyard, try to sell them.
Yeah.
You cannot do the same for Eric's Hop Company. Eric's Hop, you got to come kiss my ring and
Sure.
Pay me a lot of money. And look, I'm never going to let you grow it because it's not going to taste good enough, or I can't control you. Who knows what?
Sure.
But it's up to me. But
That's
public hops,
fascinating.
it's up to everybody.
I guess I didn't realize that there was that distinction between public and private. It makes total sense, but so recently, I think the last time I bumped into you face to face was at Railworks Brewing Depot, and you had done a collaboration, a pale ale with some experimental hops. So can you explain to people what is an experimental hop?
Well, there's no official definition of that.
Okay.
But an experimental hop would be, in my mind, a hop that is not named, which is usually one of the few last things, whether it's a public or a private hop, one of the last things that happens before it's quote unquote released. For public hops, that means released and such that anyone can grow it, blah, blah, blah. Private hops is more of a naming and a branding decision that gets made. But before it's named, I would say makes it experimental. And mostly the word experimental is doing a lot of lifting here as far as keying to brewers that this is something that's new,
Okay.
that might be interesting or fun for them to play with. Not so much that it's like, it was like a lab experiment exactly.
Sure.
They're kind of past the lab experiment
Until
part.
it gets named, it has like it's like a
There's a
droid from
cachet
Star
to it.
Wars. It's
Yeah,
like
it's R2D2.
Yeah. It's got
My favorite thing is another thing I like to say is that there's the meme of Shaq sleeping and then Shaq with the lasers coming out of his eyes, and Shaq sleeping is, hop with a name, and then Shaq laser eyes is XYZ123 hop.
Yes.
And the Shaq in that is brewers.
Yes.
They just go gaga over new experimental hops, and so people who sell hops and breed hops have keyed into that and spoon feed them at this point, just ridiculous numbers and letter combinations to get them interested and hyped up.
Yeah, that's really interesting. The specific experimental hop that Railworks used, it had a very unique to me kind of aroma and flavor. And that when Cable was telling me about it, he's like, yeah, just think like purple stuff, which is a kind of an to me was a little bit of an odd descriptor. But then I took a sip. I'm like, oh yeah, kind of like Purplesaurus Rex Kool-Aid-ish.
So that hop was HRC002. So there's the alphabet soup for that hop.
Yeah.
That hop is an experimental public hop variety. So it was bred and developed by the public breeding program we talked about earlier. And HRC is the Hop Research Council. They're a nonprofit partner to the USDA breeding program. And I've done some work with them to promote and get more trials of these varieties so that more could be known about their brewing qualities to better inform the breeders about which of these should be released and what might brewers find in this, and is it worth releasing and all this stuff.
Okay.
So HRC002 is that hop that was in that beer with Cable, and I describe it as purple. I think it's very rubbing. It's very much like purple plum, and plum is one of my favorite fruits. Plum is amazing, a lot of depth to it. But also in the beer, at higher levels of dry hopping specifically, you get this, grape, like faux purple grape flavor, not like fresh purple grapes, like what you were mentioning, the purple Kool-Aid. Like purple,
or like a grape ape.
Yeah, exactly.
Thing. Yeah.
Exactly, which I know grape apes are a social touch point of people who listen to this show.
Yes. There's a lot of grape ape devotees out there.
So anyway, this is the grape ape hop, I guess, is what I should say. If I was a marketer, I'd say it's grape ape hop. And
don't tell Modest about that, because they'll go crazy.
I've been waiting for them to find out that there's this purple hop that they could use.
Oh, yes.
But I do think that that's an interesting little snippet of how the hop industry works. There's public hops by virtue of not having profit attached to them. It's also hard for hop sellers to be motivated to promote and market them.
Right.
And so you're forgiven if you're a brewery like Modest who's really into purple flavors and doesn't know about the purple experimental hop, because there's literally $0 going into promotion of it. Whereas the other new hops, there's like some person in your brewery, at least in your email inbox every week, pestering you about this new unicorn tier fart crap, whatever thing, from them. Oh, it's the next best thing since sliced bread. And that's every email from every hop supplier every day of every week. So, it's a busy noise. But the last thing on that is just that it's interesting to me, HRC002 in particular, I do not think about hops as like a variety is this. I mean, there's an expression of each variety that's huge. Each variety has a ballpark of expressions that it might be. Huge different sets of outcomes based on terroir or harvest timing or how it was grown or the growing season or this infinite number of variables that some of which are not controllable.
Mm-hmm.
HRC002 is interesting in that I do not know of another hop that has so much of a purple expression, and certainly not that brings that type of faux purple grape flavor to the finished beer.
Yeah.
I've never experienced that in a beer before that isn't using directly fake purple flavor. And that is like endlessly interesting, right? I mean, that is a new color to paint with for a brewer.
Sure.
That's cause for excitement, because even in the downturn of hop production right now in America, there's still niches to be found. And, releasing another hop that's just like super, super fruity and sweet Like that's a crowded market. That's tough.
Yeah, it gets lost.
You got to
in the
find a
shuffle.
little slice in there.
Yeah.
There's slices to be found. I think peach is a very interesting space in that super sweet fruity world. But this grape that's kind of darker but still sweet and like very definitively grape. It's not like a metal mess of like, oh, trust me. But like that purpleness is so cool. It's a hop I'm excited about, and I think more brewers would love to have. You're not going to use this in every single IPA you ever do.
Right.
Very few hops reach that stage, but as a hop that you can get in there to make your next Citra Mosaic, hazy IPA have a little bit of a different character.
Yeah,
or maybe
stand
you're
out
more
from the
creative than
crowd.
that, and you
Yeah.
don't even use Citra Mosaic. Like part of the reason why we're here, Dan, is the hop bills in this place are expertly crafted.
Yeah.
To create some of my favorite hop expressions in the state.
Yeah.
And it doesn't use a lot of Citra Mosaic, Dan.
Yeah. So it's
Stop
possible
talking so
to
quietly,
have a brewery be successful without using those things.
It's possible to make really good beer that doesn't use the same 5 hops as everybody else. But we got to say that part quiet.
Yeah,
we got to say that
because
part quiet.
there's some breweries not far from here that I don't think got that memo. But where are some of the other breweries in Minnesota that you think do a nice job of not only using kind of the things that a lot of people use, but also are maybe a little bit more willing to veer off the beaten path when it comes to hop expression. I like that term, hop expression, because I think that it's very apropos to how a brewer uses hops.
Yeah, I mean, so we're at Dual Citizen. 9 Mile, John at 9 Mile, who was previously the head brewer at Dangerous Man. John has been around a ton of hops for a long time, Dangerous Man, and had a long history of experimenting and just saying yes to new stuff. So he has he's flexed that muscle a lot of different ways. Bang, which was we got rained out of. Recording this on the Bang patio, but Bang, by nature of being an organic brewery, has a lot less options for hops.
Sure.
Than being not organic brewery. And that restraint enables Jay and Sandy to create really awesome, cool hop expressions because they can't just click that easy button every time, because they can't just get whatever wild, crazy new thing out of whoever, whatever. And so I really think that sort of limitation, limitation tends to breed creativity. And for being an organic brewery is certainly a limitation as far as ingredient sourcing. What Neil is doing at the Bent Paddle Tap Room is really cool. It might not all be super hoppy, but he is both a very talented brewer, but also is not making those beers with the supposition that they're going to sell 1 million barrels for the next 10 years. And so he has a little bit of a longer leash to play with stuff, and I think does so with a pretty even-handed approach. But yeah, I mean, I there's plenty of folks who deserve mention for the creativity that they apply for their hop bills, and I also want to be very clear that this isn't like some judgment about if you make a Citra Mosaic hazy.
Right.
There's a lot of levels here. Like, one, you got to sell liquid that people want. People tend to like Citra Mosaic hazies. They're not that hard to make. Like, do what your business needs you to do. You got to make beer that sells.
Right.
But if you're going to come to me and say, Eric, I really want to get into hops. I want to make like this fun taproom only. Like, oh, let's go do something really, really cool.
Yeah.
We're not gonna. There's cool Citra Mosaic out there that we can find together, but we're not gonna highlight those flavors.
Right.
We might use them as the backdrop because they're kind of the consistent thing we all expect. And you drop some new thing on top of that, you can really see by contrast what that new thing, delivers. But it's a complex world, and I do think that there's a lot of room across the country for brewers who really want to dig into hops to develop their chops, to develop their knowledge, and to then ultimately deliver on more unique, expressive, distinctive hops that consumers will still, who don't care about the name, will still accept and be excited about, but that also beer nerds can go deeper and more engaged with your brand and your product on.
Yeah. It's really interesting. So I want to talk about Vista hops.
Yeah.
Tell me what sort of expression that Vista hops present in a beer, and tell me your affinity to them. Why
One
do
word,
they
they're
have
melon?
Melon. Okay. Like what type of melon?
like cantaloupe.
Okay.
Like ripe cantaloupe.
Okay.
And that's very interesting because that is also a underpopulated segment of the hop flavor universe.
Yeah.
Vista's a public hop.
Okay.
It was the most recently released public hop, named and released public hop. And my affinity for them is just that I was in between jobs when Vista was named and released. And I'm a big Bobo fan of Vista, of public hops. It's probably become clear. I'm an advocate for public hops and what they mean for American hop farmers, craft beer, and drinkers. And in general, I'm a fan of things that are, for the public good and not necessarily just generating more money for people who have oodles of it already.
Yeah.
And so Vista is a public hop, so I have that affinity just with every public hop. But Vista specifically, I was in between jobs, and so I was like, hey, one of the biggest things I think that holds public hops back from being more successful in the current market environment is that no one is marketing them. A brewer cannot buy a hop that they don't know exists.
Right.
If a hop gets released in the middle of the forest and no brewer's around to see it, does it really exist? The answer is no. We know that definitively. They do not. And so I spent my own time and money to promote Vista. I made a website and got a cool brand done by M. Sauter.
I have
Pints and Panels.
Oh yeah, I've got one. I've got a You gave me a Vista sticker, Vista hop sticker.
And so that was me doing what I felt like was right to do, and it was long term. It was my hope. It remains my hope that and there's been some signs of this, but that experience not only would it show people with actual resources in the industry that by investing in a little in public hops you can get a lot out.
Yeah.
But also that it would show that it doesn't take much. You don't have to set aside all the money you would set aside to promote a new variety that you own. You can do a lot less and still get that benefit of movement on a public variety. Because so little's being done, it's all low hanging fruit. Some dude in Malacca, Minnesota, made a website and Instagram and spent a couple $1,000 and hours over however long to post about it a little bit. That's all I did, and it made a really big difference. I mean, Vista, and it's not just because Vista's a great hop. The timing was pretty good. It grows really well. There's more to it.
Yeah.
But that little bit of effort went a really long way. The level of impact, the level of that impact was way more than the time and energy and money invested. My hope is that it stands out as an example of what can be done with a little bit more support to help public hops, achieve, more market presence than releasing them in the middle of the forest and no one can hear it.
Sure. I mean, that's when you couch it in that kind of a context, it just kind of seems like a no-brainer. What's the biggest obstacle? Just people don't think about it, or
there's a big story to so the obstacle, why don't people just market public hops, right? That's kind of the question. So one, it is no one's job to market public hops because no one owns public hops.
Okay.
Specifically, the USDA, who breeds them and chooses to release them, they are specifically not marketers. In fact, there's some amount of rules about they cannot market with their money. So it's federal money and it gets chopped up, and it's someone else's job at USDA to promote things, and they're not part of that. I don't understand all of it. It used to be in the past, all hops were public in America until the early 2000s. And so if you were a hop seller, every hop seller was just selling the same variety names, not the same exact hops because they had different relationships with different farms who grew them better or worse or differently or whatever. And so when you released Cashmere, those earlier days of proprietary hops, that was just a new hop that everyone had access to, and so merchants would want to promote it. Nowadays, when you release a new hop, such as Vista, if I'm a merchant and I own Eric's hop, and every dollar of my marketing budget I want going towards Eric's hop, because I get more power, because I control more acreage on more farms, and I get a better margin because I set the price, I control the supply, and I also get all the brewer relationships, and they're locked into me. You can't get Eric's hop from you, Dan.
Yeah.
So I'd rather sell Eric's hop. But if I'm selling Vista and you sell Vista, I might spend money promoting Vista that not only I could have spent promoting my own stuff, which of course I think is better because everyone loves the smell of their own hops.
Yep.
And it also might help you because you could sell Vista because I spent my money on Vista. And so the zero-sum attitude is relatively fresh and new to this little niche market. There's not a lot of people who work in hops. There's not a lot of companies in hops. It's a big thing, but not big by big scales.
Yeah.
And that sort of attitude is very new. It makes it extra difficult for public hops to find a footing. They're kind of like orphan in a way. They get released by the USDA breeder, and now no one's really in charge of them anymore. There is no entity that explicitly wants to or needs to care about their performance in the marketplace. We all care. There's a lot of people who really care. There's a lot of passion around public hops, and a lot of believers in public hops. But to date, there is no place where that gets expressed in quite the same way with marketing budgets.
Yeah.
Than a variety that a company owns. They have a lot of incentive to promote that. They invest a lot of time and money into breeding that hop. They got to try to make it back on the back end.
Yeah, it's just it's kind of crazy how all of that works. Is a lot of what you do as kind of being an ambassador, a consultant of hops, trying to kind of plant those seeds to try to kind of build it from the ground up?
I mean, not like explicitly, but when I talk to a brewer about a recipe, or talk about to a brewer about a collab, or write in hop notes about what's going on in the market, I'm always sharing public hops and the story of public hops in that, or also my big reason for public hops is that they are very beneficial for farmers because they give them choice and independence. Farmer-owned varieties are very similar to that. Which I mean varieties that are owned by independent individual farms. So there's shades. Again, I want to be very clear. There's shades to this. It's not this public is good and all private is bad.
Mm-hmm.
There's
right.
shades to all of this. But just that, I think, so I'm a farmer, and I farmed hops in the past, and I struggle as a consumer of things when I purchase things. I don't want to be purchasing things that somewhere along the way someone was exploited. I don't want my convenience to overrule someone else's livelihood.
Yes. Yeah.
That's very hard to do as an American, as an American consumer. It's very, very hard to do. I'm a hypocrite. I don't do it every day. Some days I buy Cheez-Its. Some days I buy something that has palm oil in it. There's nothing we can do in this world. You know what I mean? So that's a different podcast. But the point here is that when it comes to beer, the space that I know and love, when it comes to hop farmers, a community that I'm a part of, that I was formerly a literal part of and now a part of at a more industry level, is this is my little corner. And so in my little corner of this world, I want to be doing the best thing that I can do, right? To communicate the people that I can communicate to inspire the people I can inspire, that, hey, pay attention to the economics, the winners and losers that your, ingredient purchasing has if you're a brewer, and that your beer purchasing has if you're a consumer. Because, I mean, this is not going to happen. I'm not advocating for this. A brewery isn't bad if they put Citra on their label, their hazy IPA that you like. You're not bad for liking it. My point is, next time you're at the place, ask if they have a public hop. You got a beer with any public hops in it?
Well, and I think that's part of the reason why people doing podcasts and people doing, writing about beer is important, because these nuggets come up, and, to shine a light on something like that, it's super duper important. So I want to touch on, you mentioned that you had a point where you were growing hops, Mighty X hops. I'm not going to go into too much about it, but what inspired you to grow your own hops?
I wanted to farm for a living. I was really committed to that early in farming. I still farm. My wife and I farm in Malacca. We grow cut flowers, not hops. I have 2 hop plants, but it's a lot less than where I was. But I wanted to farm for a living, and so in order to do that, I needed to find a crop that I liked to grow, and that I felt I could grow at a scale which would support me to have a living, but also everyone who was working on it. I mean, the amount of gross income, from a crop, you got a lot of crop to pay a lot of people. And so it ended up being hops. I loved craft beer, I loved farming, and I loved the crop. It's a perennial, which means it comes back every year. There's a different flow to cycle and feel to the season of a perennial crop as to growing vegetables or livestock. And so that's how it ended up being hops.
So when we were talking about kind of optimal growing conditions, Washington State, Oregon, the dry side of Idaho, what are the pros and cons of trying to grow hops in Minnesota, and what does Minnesota terroir?
Minnesota's a terrible place to grow hops. Most places that aren't dry side of Washington, Oregon, and Idaho, are terrible places to grow hops. Minnesota's tough. Minnesota's got a very short growing season relative to these other spaces. Minnesota's humid and wet relative to these other places. That doesn't mean you can't grow them here. It's just very difficult to achieve commercial scale yields, which means competing on price can be difficult.
Yeah.
But terroir, Minnesota terroir is, can't define it. Terroir influences different hop varieties in different ways. Some varieties you can move and plant all across the country, and there's minimal differences. Some varieties are massive differences, very noticeable differences in the expression of that variety. And one of the hops that's maybe most commonly known for that is Michigan Chinook, which is Chinook. Chinook grown basically outside the Pacific Northwest tends to be more pineapple-y and fruity, whereas West Coast Chinook traditionally is known to be like grapefruit and pine.
Okay.
That's what's in fresh squeezed. I think terroir influences different varieties differently.
Yeah.
And one of the things that we really explored, and one of the things I really appreciated about growing hops and then at Mighty Axe was just like, let's find different ways to try to talk about why this hop is different because it was grown in this specific place, in a way that resonated with brewers. And we were pretty successful in that. We ended up naming hops. We called our Cascade Julius because it was sweet orange. We got a C&D from a specific company about that name. Super funny. Super funny.
They didn't
Considering
operate
one of the most
from,
famous craft beers in the world
a wooden structure in a tree, did they?
What's the name of that very famous craft beer hazy IPA from Vermont?
Oh.
It's from Treehouse.
Well, yeah.
They didn't send us a C&D. A much larger company who sells ice cream products and frozen treats. Frozen cakes, smoothies, ice cream cones.
That's so weird.
Like snowstorm themed milkshakes. Sent us a C&D.
Really?
That's Dairy Queen. Of course, we can say it's Dairy Queen. But
okay.
But yeah.
So that was Orange
very,
Julius? That's wild. Okay.
Anyway, don't worry. Yeah. Julius from Treehouse, the beer that is very famous.
Yeah.
I guess doesn't count.
Okay.
But anyway, the point of all of that was just to say that, what I learned a lot from Mighty Axe, a whole lot. I mean, a lot of places where this was not a good person, needed to be better. A lot of things about, ego and overconfidence at a younger age. Would I do it all over again? I don't know. But ultimately, I think from a hops perspective, I fell in love with them in a very different way. Requiring them to grow well and sell for a living was a wild level of risk and stress.
Yeah.
But also just like trying all these different ways to communicate to brewers that, this local product or that this variety was different because it was from a different farmer, a different place. That made me cynical at points, but also it's shared with me a lot of insight into sort of the brewer psyche and the consumer psyche, and ultimately, gives me hope that whatever comes in the hop industry through storytelling, marketing, sales, and connecting brewers, there's so much power in connecting brewers to where their ingredients come from, just like connecting you and I and what we eat, connecting to where those products come from gives us an incredible amount of fulfillment in our world. Gives us some place to be rooted in a world that maybe is increasingly, I was talking about, is increasingly disconnected. We're all just looking at our own phones, but there was like real things. There are real people, real things are happening to real people with real tangible goods and real farms all the time. And reconnecting to that can be an opportunity for us as consumers to like fall back in love with our beer, but also for brewers to fall back in love with their ingredients. I mean, I think we're not the only ones. I'm not the only one who thinks like Citra Mosaic is boring. Like, you say that at a brewery conference, everyone kind of chuckles because they know. They're like, got it, but I use it, and I got to use it. I got this contract, and people want it.
But everybody is still so beholden to it. And
yeah.
like all it would take would be for people to be like, all right, let's try something let's put the money where our mouth is, and like we could. I don't think. I mean, I don't. People would still brew with those ingredients, and that would be good. But maybe it would open up the channels for some other public hops to have a little bit of more of a.
I mean, there's room in the world of hop flavor expression. There's room in the world of craft beer consumer for a whole lot more diversity of hop flavors, hop ownership models, hop growing locations, hop geographies than the majority come from right now.
Yeah.
And, that saying that is something that the ones who are in the majority and have all the power and money right now, they don't like to hear that. They don't want to support that.
Right.
But I think the majority of craft brewers really would benefit from, and all of us drinking beer, of course. Like, we benefit.
Yeah.
We benefit when there's more competition in hops. We benefit when there's more experimentation in beer. We benefit when our brewers have more tools at their disposal, more flavors, more colors to play with in the brew house. And so I think there's a very David Goliath thing, or David versus like the crowd thing here, where Goliath versus the crowd thing here, where many of us, there's a lot more of us in the crowd who benefit from more diversity and more competition and more independence than those who benefit from more control, less diversity, and less competition.
I want to change the focus a little bit right now to homebrewers, which, a few minutes ago you said we all benefit more when we know where our food is coming from. And when I think of, we're talking about like buying local, buying, products and things like that. The whole reason we're sitting here at Dual Citizen is because decades ago, homebrewing became a passion for a lot of people. And I think it was very much akin to like finding out where your crops are grown, going into Northern Brewer or whatever local homebrew shop and physically being able to touch grains, taste grains, and see things. And now there are no more brick and mortar Northern Brewers, Midwest Brewing Supplies. How does a home brewer get hops? Is it just online? Is that going to be forever? Is the pendulum going to swing back? Is that something that you deal with a lot in how you interact with hops?
I'm not a homebrew market expert. I'm hopeful that another brick and mortar will open here in the cities. I know some scuttlebutt is going around that people are dreaming on it, and I hope that they are successful and we're able to go there and patronize them. Patronize?
Yeah.
Buy stuff from them, please, if they were to open. But I think for hops specifically, homebrewers represent a tiny slice of hop sales, and in a market where hops are trending downward, farms are struggling, merchants are struggling. Even the big merchants are like, everyone's circling the wagons, trying to, make it through this winter phase of a downturn in the hop market. That puts homebrewers even further down the list of priority, just because homebrewers do not count for any volume in a general scale of like hop consumption.
Yeah.
Very, very, very small percent. So, in one hand, that's tricky, but there are many places where smaller volumes matter a lot. Homebrewers have always been an opportunity for farms and sellers to experiment with unique and new things because you can sell 10 pounds, it's 160 ounces. It's a lot of homebrewer reps on a new variety. Or specifically for local farms, if your local homebrew club gets together to like co-buy 11 pounds from a local farm that produces 10,000 pounds a year, that means a whole lot more than buying 11 pounds from a company that sells, millions of pounds of hops a year.
Right.
And so I think for homebrewers, what I would encourage homebrewers to do who really want to get into hops is, you're not going to just be able to shop from like, the usual places that show up when you Google who are like got sponsored ads and whatever, but you can go and find almost every, they grow hops in Washington, Oregon, Idaho, but they also grow hops in California, Wisconsin, Michigan, New York, Vermont, Maine. You can find hops grown in a lot of places, and Montana, and finding Minnesota, finding hops in those from those farms who, package down to 1 pound or 1 ounce sizes, like they're happy for your business.
Yeah.
And you can get access to cool hops. They're all public varieties, so they're all names that like you've heard of, like, oh, Cascade's so boring. But like, have you played with Cascade from Maine, from Vermont? Further east you go, Cascade tends to get a little sweeter, a little more orangey. Have you done that?
Yeah.
And so I think that that's an opportunity where homebrewers can both like access really cool and unique flavors and hops, but then also have a place where their purchase volume, matters more, and so therefore they get better service and more attention and whatever.
Yeah. All right. So somebody comes up to you. They've got a glimmer in their eye, and they say, Eric, I'm thinking about starting a hop farm. What advice do you give them? Or do you just run?
Well, so right now especially is a tough time to grow hops, even if you've been growing them for 4 generations in Oregon. I would not tell anyone to start growing hops right now. You're going to want to wait until you think the market might be getting better instead of getting worse. Because right now there's way too many hops in the market of every kind, of any kind. Not every single kind, but there's way too many hops in the market. And the price for hops in general is going to be going down, and the supply is going to go down, and until those things kind of correct themselves, too tough. But in general, I would say that I still believe that there's enough breweries in Minnesota that you could convince to care about where their product comes from, that you could have a meaningful Minnesota-based hop production. Maybe it's 100 acres, maybe it's 50 acres, and that's not a lot compared to global hop production.
Right.
But that's 50 to 100 acres-ish more than we have now. I think we have like 3 or 4.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that I always say is, is if brewers want there to be local hop production, they'll get it. But brewers have to invest. Brewers have to take that risk. Brewers have to be willing to pay 50% more per pound of hops for Cascade hops. Brewers have to be willing to experiment and learn and see how to make these, Cascade hops that smell different or aren't as perfect as the stuff out west, But if brewers don't want any of that, no one cares. Nothing any farmer can do about it. Nothing any consumer can do about it. And that's a tough time, too, because, again, brewers are not in the best spot they've ever been in, and trying to, guilt them into caring more about, even just where their ingredients come from, period, whether it's local or not, is not very high on every brewer's list right now. They're worried about margin and empty take space and cost of aluminum and who knows. So.
Yeah, I think we're at the point in the craft beer industry where there needs to be some pruning happening, and I think it's happening. I think it's just as things go. I think in Minnesota we're quite lucky to have the quality and range of breweries that we have, but with that means that the bar is higher, and kind of like as I trying to get my basil to grow in my garden, you got to snip off some of the parts that look healthy to get it to grow even more prominently. So if people want to follow you, people want to get in touch with you for hop consulting, how do they do that?
Yeah, I have a website, brewingisag.com. I have a free monthly newsletter on Substack called Hop Notes, where you can read a lot of the topics discussed here, and very much in depth. I'm on Instagram. I think it's eric.sannerud. But those are some ways that I'm out there in the world that you can find me. And whether it's not just for consulting services, but just for learning more about hops. I think a lot of what I do right now is trying to educate and inspire brewers specifically about what's going on in the hop world, and ways that they can engage in that world that maybe fit their values more, or allow them to be more creative, or show them new flavors and ingredients that they can access. Generally as positive as I can be. I don't lie, I don't toe company lines, and don't talk about how we have problems. But I'm not over here pretending like the sky is falling and it's all bad and there's nothing we can do. I do have hope. I believe in a very bright future for the hop industry in America. One that supports independent growers, one that supports independent brewers, one that supports independent sellers with competition and creativity. and independence, and just a little bit of punk attitude still, hopefully, and we can do all this together.
Well, I want to thank you for taking time out of your day to talk hops. I have learned a metric butt ton about hops, and I think that I speak for all 12 of my listeners when I say thank you for sharing your knowledge with me and everyone. And I think it's really important that your passion is so evident sitting across the table from you, and that is it's engaging, it's inspiring, it's exciting. It's why I love having these conversations. And so I just want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for sharing your passion and being so passionate about it. I think it's amazing. Beer is a wonderful beverage, and if people, I wish people would invest more time in learning like what's behind this humble drink that we're enjoying, because there's so much. So thank you so much for your time. I appreciate you. This has been another episode of a One Pint Stand. Cheers.
Cheers.
Wow. I learned so much about hops in my conversation with Eric. I hope that you found it as interesting as I did. Eric is supremely passionate about hops and is someone we are lucky to have in the craft beer scene. People like Eric are why I love doing this podcast. I love to geek out about beer, and I love learning about every aspect of it. Eric is a tremendous steward of this magnificent ingredient, and I strongly recommend you bookmark www.sannerudhopconsulting.com. And make sure to follow his Substack to get his hop notes at ericsannerud.substack.com. As it tends to do on this show, the time has flown by. Before we go, I want to give a huge thanks again to the sponsor for this episode, First Draft Tap Solutions. Whether you need someone reliable to clean your lines, or you need to install a new draft system, or just get technical support, Brett Erickson at First Draft Tap Solutions is your guy. Email him at firstdrafttapsolutions@gmail.com or give him a call at 612-839-5304 if you need some quality assistance. So thank you for listening, and this has been another episode of A One Pint Stand, a Minnesota craft beer podcast where the pants stay on, but the caps come off. Cheers.
Like get notoriety.
Notoriety. I like the way you say it. I'm gonna
Notoriety.
Notoriety.